So now we're discussing day 5 and day 6 of the Tom Girardi trial, the legal trial of the century. And let's start off with day 5, Stewart, where we had some very interesting testimony from a longtime accountant at Girardi and Keys. She worked there from 2003 until 2020 when the firm went under. And she had some very interesting testimony to provide to us. What was kind of your thoughts in terms of what her testimony was?
Well, when you're a defense attorney in this case and you've got all this, what appears to be overwhelming evidence against you, you're looking for nuggets. You're looking for anything that will help you in the case. And then, of course, you want to put that in front of the jury at the time of closing. And here it looks like we have the first nugget that I've seen in this case, and that is you have this Roulliard who worked for Christopher Kamen and had been at the firm for an extensive amount of 2003 or so to 2020.
Yeah, 17 years.
Yeah, she said when asked on cross-exam, I believe, about the cognition that Mr. Girardi was showing, I think she tried on the stand to say, it wasn't too off. But then, of course, there's some text messages from her that she thought he was off by late November 2020. So now, you can say, well, at least there's one person who's come forward and said, look, the guy was off. He was calling her 35 times a day. It just didn't make sense when he would call her. He'd repeat himself over and over. Those are things we see from people that have cognitive decline. And so that's something that the defense is going to seize on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think Roulliard was there on the ground, doing all the checks. Now, she did testify that only Tom Girardi could sign checks going out to clients.
There was a stamp, though, a stamp signature that people could use, right?
But there was a signature stamp,
yeah.
And so that kind of blew a hole in that a little bit, although you still can see, and we've seen from past testimony, that Girardi's really the man. He's the one who's calling the shots, usually, in terms of how much money is going out to clients. They also had her testify that the accounting spreadsheets had some redundant entries and some phantom checks. And again, I think that's an effort to show that this wasn't Girardi's doing, this is Kamen's doing.
Right.
Girardi doesn't know what's going on. Kamen's one running the show. And then the defense attorney actually came up and said, well, wait a minute. Tom Girardi's the only owner of the firm, right? He's the sole owner of the firm. So he can do whatever he wants with his money. And that includes paying bills for EJ Global. So the fact that he spent $21.8 million on expenses for EJ Global would be perfectly fine, provided that he was using the firm's money.
If he's using his money, not client's money, yes.
Yeah, and on redirect, of course, the prosecutor picked up on that and asked Roulliard if Girardi was entitled to spend. He asked Roulliard, was Girardi entitled to spend all of the client's money? Answer:
of course not.
Of course not. Yeah. So sure, if it truly was all his money, then how he spent it was no skin off anybody else's nose. Now we also heard testimony from Alan Zimmerman. He is with a litigation finance firm, and they loaned $12 million to Girardi and Keys.
Yes.
And he said the part I like the best about what he said is Tom Girardi was no fool. There was a reason why he was as successful as a lawyer as he was, because he was no fool. So what were your thoughts on his testimony?
Well, with Alan Zimmerman, and these are entities that get this, he was a law finance group, I think they were called. They give loans to personal injury attorneys so that the personal injury attorneys have a cash flow to use on a case during the pendency of the case. And obviously a very successful lawyer like Tom Girardi could get large loans. They're at usually high interest rates. Maybe Mr. Girardi was able to get a lower interest rate. But in any event, $12 million was loaned in 2015. And there was two things that hit me on Mr. Zimmerman's testimony. And the first is that he said Girardi was completely capacitated to him during that time. So we know in 2015, according to one witness, he didn't see any mental decline in this guy. The other thing that was interesting is that another lawyer at Girardi and Keys came to him at some point and said, hey, did you ever get paid back for your loan? Which made him a little nervous, and he's thinking, what the heck's going on here? And then, of course, he does not get paid back for the loan.
Yeah, and apparently, and I'm reading between the lines here, the reporter didn't come out and say this, but typically the way the litigation loans work is that when a settlement comes in on a big case, you're supposed to pay the loan back or some portion of the loan back. And so I think that attorney for Girardi and Keys clued in the lender, this Alan Zimmerman, that, hey, have you gotten paid? As in, we got a settlement where you told about it. He was not. And then that set off alarm bells that oh boy, I should have been told about that, and I probably should have been paid. So that's when he went to Tom Girardi, and of course he gets the same song and dance that everybody else got, according to Alan Zimmerman's testimony. And that's when Alan Zimmerman said, well, look, he was very sharp, and he was a sharp individual. There's no guessing as to why he was successful. He knew what he was doing, and he was no fool.
Wasn't there also some testimony that when Tom Girardi got this loan in 2015 from Zimmerman's group, that Girardi wasn't willing to share financial records to substantiate that they had the resources to pay back this loan, but he was able to show him that there was a settlement coming in from, I think, Shell Oil Company, where it was $80-90 million. And so presumably the law firm is going to get 1/3 of that. And so that's when the loan was made. And of course, this loan would not have been made to just anybody, because this was Tom Girardi, and everyone just thought, this guy, he's good at his business. He's worth the risk.
Yeah, Zimmerman said Girardi was the only attorney who would refuse to let them have access to his bank accounts, because normally what they do is they get access to the firm's bank accounts so they can monitor the money coming in, and when they see a big settlement coming in, then they know that they're supposed to be paid. Girardi refused to allow that to happen, but of course the lender made the loan anyway because he thought Girardi was getting a $30 million fee because he settled the case. And so, nobody usually, cries for lending companies. But that was an example of where the lender probably made a mistake by loaning Girardi money in the first place. But he's in a long line of people who made a mistake by trusting Tom Girardi at this point, based on all the testimony that we've heard.
Yes, exactly.
So let's discuss day 6 of the Tom Girardi trial. And it just keeps rolling out here. And now we're again getting into a case. It's a very sad case. A woman by the name of Erica Saldana, whose 1-year-old baby was paraplegic after a terrible car accident. She hires Tom Girardi. He gets a remarkable settlement for her, $17.5 million. Part of that's money for her and her husband. Part of it is for the child. The child subsequently passes away, unfortunately. And she's supposed to get at least $3 million, and she never got the last $1 million. And she keeps calling and calling, asking for her last $1 million. And obviously, she doesn't get paid that $1 million. So we have yet another witness that is testifying that Tom Girardi was giving her the runaround. What was your thoughts in terms of the Erica Saldana witness?
Well, obviously, this pulls at the heartstrings, because this is the reason that personal injury attorneys, good personal injury attorneys, are around. They're there to help people access justice, and they do it based on contingency fees so that they can actually represent people. People don't have to put cold, hard money out of their pockets into hiring a lawyer on an hourly fee, which can be quite expensive. Contingency fees are also expensive, but you don't have to pay anything until the lawyer earns their keep, in other words, and gets a settlement. So here you've got the $17 million settlement. I think $10 million was going to a special needs trust, and the rest was going to the Saldanas. And this child dies. It's just, I can't imagine. We all have kids. What a horrific experience. But to add to that, there's this money that she's owed. She's calling Tom Girardi. He finally says, well, stop by the front desk and we'll have a check for you. And, she's thinking she's going to get about $500,000 in a check. So she stops by the front desk and she has a $5,000 check. And it's just a slap in the face. It's just not appropriate.
Yeah, it really is. And it's particularly a slap in the face when you hear the next witness, and that is an IRS special agent, Ryan Robertson. He puts together these spreadsheets, and of course, once again, where he's documenting that $21.8 million went out of the general ledger account from Girardi and Keese to pay for expenses of EJ Global from 2010 to 2020. But there's more than that. Get this. $12 million went to pay for 2 private aircraft, $3.8 million to country clubs, and $5 million in luxury cars over that period. And in all of that combined came to $69 million. And then there was another $26.7 million that went out of the firm into Girardi's own pocket. So the $69 million, that's just stuff that was paid out of the firm. It didn't go to Girardi. Well, it went to Girardi, but not directly. And then the 26.7, that's a substantial amount of money leaving this firm year after year after year. And at the same time, you have this story of the Saldanas where she's entitled to $1 million. It's her money. She thinks she's going to pick up a check for $500,000, and he gives her a check for $5,000.
And that's because he didn't have any money to give her. And he was, it looks like this was a bit of a Ponzi scheme where he was using future settlements to pay for past settlements. And at some point, that's going to catch up with you like it does with anybody that's running a Ponzi scheme. I kind of want to know what are the type of aircraft they had. I'm interested in that. Which country clubs? I know at some point he was at the Jonathan Club. So how much was he paying for that? If he did pay for it out of the firm's resources. And then an Aston Martin and a Lamborghini. I guess those two cars together aren't quite $5 million. So what are the other cars? But in any event, $70 million going out for these things. And then to add to that, I need to live too. So I need another $27 million out to myself. So it looks like there's a lot of money moving out. The EJ Global stuff, that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. It doesn't look like Erica Jane, whatever her name is. It doesn't look like she's testifying in this case, but I would be curious as to her view of all of this.
And the other testimony that we saw too is another witness, Kathy Marlett, who was a consultant for Girardi and Keese for 27 years. And she testified to some of the codes in the ledgers that Cayman would use. And some of the expenses that were going out would be coded as can of worms and mystery. Well, I'll tell you what, if you've got a bookkeeper or an accounting person who's putting things in your books called can of worms and mystery, you've got a problem.
That may be a red flag. And then I think she also, this is Kathy Marlett you're speaking of?
Yes.
Didn't she also say that Christopher Cayman couldn't do accounting, like even a first-year accounting student or something to that effect?
Yeah, he had no real knowledge of accounting at all, but he had no problem with moving money around. That he seemed to be an expert at. But in terms of accounting, that seemed to be a problem. According to Kathy Marlett, I mean that was her testimony.
Did you also notice that during the same time frame that we're talking about here, there was $1 billion that moved through the client settlement accounts at Girardi and Keese?
Yeah, I mean a substantial amount of money, and that kind of brings us to the whole point. We haven't really talked about this up to now, but how does somebody get started doing this sort of thing? I mean, I don't think that Tom Girardi woke up one morning and said, "I'm going to steal all my clients' money." But when you have that much money coming into a firm, it's probably not hard when somebody starts kind of getting behind or needing a little extra money, say, well, I'm just going to borrow it from my trust account, even though it's not your money, because I have so much coming in, I'll just put it back.
Right.
And so I'll take $500,000 now because this other settlement's coming in, and I'll take $500,000 of my future money and I'll just give it back to the clients, whoever they are. But then that turns into $1 million, and then $5 million, and then $10 million. I mean, it must start some way small, and then a person kind of economizes it over time in order to get to the point where you're ultimately taking, $60, $70, $80 million.
Well, that's right. And when we do things that are wrong, we don't say, I'm a despicable person, look how awful I am. We say things like, well, I'm saving my client's money. I would normally have to go to a litigation finance firm like I did in 2015 when I took $12 million. And there's an interest rate component on that. And of course, the clients have to pay for that out of their portion of the case. So I'm going to save them that money. I'll just go ahead and move money around. And, I'm a very well-known lawyer. People are going to continue to hire me, and I'll just make sure to make all of this right in the future. But everybody's better off in the end because of what I'm doing here. Look at all the sacrifices I'm making for my clients. Once you economize it in your mind like that, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate, but I have to think that that's how it started. Another interesting witness from day 6. So now this is a lawyer who had referred a case over to Tom Girardi, Hovig John Abbasian, First Legal Solutions. And so he was expecting to get 50% of a $5.1 million fee, and somehow he ended up with the check, but the check had his name on it and Girardi's name on it. So he has to go to Girardi's office and say, hey, I need you to sign the check. I'll sign it. You'll sign it. And of course, Girardi got very upset that he even had the check. What'd you think about that?
Well, I mean, it shows that he didn't know that the money had gone out. I guess that could be played either way. But obviously, when the lawyer shows when this Abbasian shows the check to Girardi grabs it away from him and takes it and says, you don't get this, and shoo, get out of here. And then the next week, Abbasian gets invited to a big party in Las Vegas at the Consumer Attorneys Association of Los Angeles, which we are part of that association.
Yeah.
And we go to every year, we go out to Vegas for our annual CLEs. We don't go out there to steal our clients' money. We don't go out there to do inappropriate things. But ultimately, Abbasian, it had to be a little bit of a whipsaw. You're getting yelled at. You get a check ripped away from you. Oh, but then you get invited to go to the big party out in Vegas for that year from the Girardi firm.
Yeah, I mean, Girardi was so mad that you shouldn't even have that check. What are you doing with that check? Well, of course, because Girardi needs the money, $5 million. And then, yeah, you get an invitation to a cocktail party. So rather than getting half of $5 million, $2.5 million, you'll be able to have, what, a martini?
Or two.
Or two, and some hors d'oeuvres. So I don't think that quite offsets it. But that again, is some very damning testimony from yet another witness. And we're seeing a constant theme on each one of these witnesses. The MO seems to be consistent all the way through.
I will say the one concession from the previous day, getting the concession that he did have some cognitive disabilities, I think that that's something that the defense can hang on to, but they're going to have to keep stepping that back further and further if they can, because that's November of 2020 when she testified to this, that she noticed that he wasn't quite right. There's a lot of bad things that happened up to that point in time, and it appears that he was the one that was in control of everything.
Yeah, because you have from 2010 all the way to 2020. So even if at the very end of 2020, and the other thing I would say about his cognitive decline in 2020 is he must have been under extreme pressure because everything was going south. The firm clearly wasn't bringing in the money it needed to bring in to keep this whole scheme going. And so how much of that was dementia and things, and how much of it was just severe pressure, I don't know. But it's an interesting question because since somebody's under that much pressure, I think that they can suffer, what looks like cognitive decline.
And don't forget, he's 80, 81 in 2020. You're over 50 now. I'm over 50 now. I don't respond well to stress like I used to. I get tired easier. I wonder what it's going to be like at 81. I mean, you kind of look up to the guy in one sense that, he was able to keep everything going as long as he did. Didn't somebody say that, he was the godfather of the industry? And if you think about personal injury attorneys, for years there's been these contingency fees, but there's been a lot of research over the last 30 years on how to talk to juries, what words to use. I think of the book Reptile. I forget who wrote that, David Ball and some other personal injury attorney out of Georgia, I think he is. They explain how you sweet talk a jury. And there's ways to get juries to come to your side just based on an emotional argument that you make. And in fact, now there's many rules in courts that don't allow you to make those arguments to juries. I can think of one is you would tell the jury that they are the conscience of the community. And for some reason that resonated with juries, and they were some big awards on the plaintiff side of things. But Tom Girardi was part of this. He was part of forming this industry. And you had lots of younger lawyers that looked up to him who are now fantastic trial attorneys across California and across the nation. And the one thing I would say about this case, Keith, is I do want to say I think this is a very limited happening with Tom Girardi and the Michael Avenettis of the world. I do think, nobody likes lawyers, but we have to have them. We need them to help get through some difficult times. I think for the most part, most of the lawyers I know are decent human beings that work hard under some really stressful environments. The stress loads are high as a lawyer, and they care for the clients, and they don't steal from their clients. But the problem is now we have this media attention of Tom Girardi, Michael Avenatti, and people like their ilk that stole from their clients. And again, I think your point's well taken. I don't think these guys started out thinking, I'm going to steal from my clients. It started out very innocently, probably, or close to innocent, and it just grew into something that was uncontrollable. And then when the balloon popped, here we are, and this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, a huge mess. But no, I think most lawyers try really hard to comply with our ethical duties. We take pride in complying with our ethical duties. And, guys like Girardi, they don't just steal from their clients. They're the real victims, but, the whole profession and us too.
Suffer.
Yeah, he stole something from us too. I mean, he steals a little bit of our reputation, and it's unfortunate because, most people don't like lawyers as it is. But, yeah, rest assured that most attorneys are not doing this. But, wow, what a spectacular fall. Going back to your analogy of Icarus, here's a guy who definitely flew too close to the sun, and now he's paying for it.